Welcome into another Quick Hit Bears. I'm your host, Grayson Grundhafer, and today we're going to talk about Baylor's new running back, Dominic Richardson, the Oklahoma State transfer, a guy who we saw last year at Oklahoma State. You know, he kind of got lumped into what happened there. I mean, Spencer Sanders got hurt. From that point on, just everything fell apart for the Cowboys, and so it really took a toll on his numbers and what could have been a really, really productive year for Dom, and now he's at Baylor. He made the transfer to Baylor last season. The 6', 207-pound running back ran for 543 yards on 149 carries, 8 touchdowns, 3.6 yards per carry. He also had 22 receptions for 220 yards, so a nice pass-catching boost there for Dominic. But I want to focus in on a couple things before we get into some of the things that he said for Baylor. So in that stretch, so he had 543 yards, 8 touchdowns. All 8 of his touchdowns were in the first 7 games of the season when Oklahoma State was 6-1. After that, he only played 2 games the rest of the year, was dealing with various injuries, but in those final 2 games, he had 28 carries for 92 yards. Those were against Kansas and Iowa State. So nothing to write home about, but I will tell you, that offense was terrible once Spencer Sanders got hurt, and in those first 7 games, he was clearly their top running back. He was their most productive running back by a lot, and I think if Spencer Sanders would have played the whole year and if Dominic Richardson had stayed healthy, there's a good chance he could have been a 1,000-yard rusher last year. So I wouldn't look into the 3.6 yards per carry or kind of the overall numbers without really looking at it in this scope. The other thing I want to bring up, he's got 4 games that I would consider blow-up games where he just absolutely erupted on the field. So the first one, Baylor 2020, he had 23 carries for 169 yards and 3 touchdowns. TCU 2021, 12 carries for 134 yards, 2 touchdowns. Arizona State this year, 27 carries for 131 yards and a touchdown. And then finally, TCU also this year, he had 22 carries for 72 yards and a touchdown, and he also added 3 catches for 79 yards. So he's shown the ability to have these massive breakout games where he where he totals over 130 yards, scores multiple touchdowns. He's done that before. And there aren't a lot of Baylor running backs on the roster right now who have done that outside of, Richard Reese. And so to have him, I think, in the fold really shows you kind of what this offense could be and what he could bring to the table. So as far as the reasons why he transferred to Baylor, he addressed those in the Baylor media session this week.
Just the environment, man, and just the spread of love, the coaches and the players. I just felt like this was a great place, a great fit for me. This being a Christian school as well, I'm a big Christian, and I just feel like the offense is like my play style. It's the biggest thing.
Okay, so obviously a couple things here that I think are really important. So he mentioned the environment. So let's start there. Mike Gundy, we saw last year there was a struggle and a disconnect with the players in that locker room, and it reared its ugly head late in the season. There had been talks about that with Gundy for a long time, but I think it finally reached a boiling point once they started losing some games, once Spencer Sanders got injured. All those things I don't think really aligned, and their culture was not good enough to overcome that. So he sees Baylor's culture, loves it. He says it's very different than Oklahoma State. He mentioned that a couple times. He mentioned Gundy being old school, putting his foot down, maybe yelling a little bit more, whereas Dave Aranda, when he needs to get things across, he's very firm with those things. But he also talks more about off the field as well. And so I think that relates better with players, and it clearly relates better with Dom. He also mentioned the wide zone being a great fit as a reason why he chose Baylor. And I think that makes sense. A.J. Stewart and him already have a strong relationship. I think he enjoys the fact that he can get downhill in a hurry, which is something we saw from him against Baylor this year. The ability to get hit in the backfield and still get 3 or 4 yards is massive in this offense. We saw it with Abram Smith and Treston Ebner to a lesser extent 2 seasons ago. But last year they didn't really have that. And unfortunately, their body types that they had with Richard Reese and Squirrel Williams didn't really lean itself to being that way. And I know Squirrel at times showed it, but not to the level that I think Dominic Richardson will be able to. It's going to be an adjustment for him because they ran a lot of inside zone at Oklahoma State with wide zone, but more inside zone out of the shotgun, especially with Spencer Sanders. But I think at Baylor, this is going to give him a great edge, allowing him to read blocks, allowing him to get downhill in a hurry, follow his offensive linemen, and really gain momentum and steam. And that's something that I think he's going to do a really, really good job of in this Baylor offense. They also addressed what his role would be, kind of what the expectation is for him at Baylor, which is going to be very important in this running back room.
My role is pretty much like, being a leader, knowing what I'm supposed to do on and off the field for the younger backs and even the older backs. I have to know what I'm talking about, not only like offense, also the defense. So like it'd be easy for me on the field. So I think that's the main step for me.
Okay, so just like every position for Baylor, there needs to be leaders at every position. And Dominic Richardson just screams leader to me when you listen to him talk. I know the room has some older guys with Quaylon Jones, and I think Quaylon is a guy who has been around the block for a long time. He's been at Baylor for some time now. I think he's a leader in the room as well. I think Richard Reese is getting there. And I think Dominic Richardson just adds to that. And he's a guy who's played a lot of football. He played 4 games as a true freshman and then 13 as a sophomore and 9 in his third year at Oklahoma State. So I do think that there's reason to think that he'll be maybe more consistent and just consistent as a leader and as a player. And for that reason, I think adding him as a veteran running back, I know he's got 2 years left, but during his time at Oklahoma State, he played a lot more than a lot of guys. And so I think that veteran mentality really shows up for him. And I think he understands the game a lot. And I think that's a big reason why Baylor ended up taking him, because of that leadership, the knowledge of the game on the field, bringing someone into the running back room who has a lot of experience and a guy who's been a top running back at a Power 5 program. And so I think you add all that together, and that makes Dominic Richardson a perfect fit for the Baylor offense in 2023.